Waste of space. The words echoed in my head as I watched my son's Mercedes disappear down the street, his wife's laughter still ringing in my ears. My name is James Sullivan, 58 years old, former executive chef at one of Chicago's top restaurants, and apparently an embarrassment to my own family. I stood next to my food truck, gleaming stainless steel with Sullivan's Street Cuisine painted in bold burgundy letters. It had cost me most of my retirement savings, but after 35 years in professional kitchens, I wasn't ready to sit in a rocking chair and fade away. The truck was parked in the business district. The lunch crowd would be here soon. I started prepping my signature dishes, fusion cuisine that blended my Irish heritage with Asian and Latin influences. Recipes I'd perfected over decades, simplified for street service, but never compromising on quality. Thomas, my only son, had just stopped by for the first time since I'd started this venture 3 months ago. He worked in investment banking, married to Victoria from Old Money. They lived in a mansion in the Gold Coast, drove luxury cars, and apparently found the idea of his father running a food truck mortifying. "Dad, you were executive chef at Lawrence," he'd said, his expensive suit probably worth more than my monthly food costs. "This is beneath you. What will people think?" I simply kept slicing my homemade corned beef for the Korean fusion Reubens that had already developed a following among local office workers. "They'll think I'm doing what I love, son." Victoria had wrinkled her nose at the smell of cooking meat. "James, really, you don't need to work. Thomas makes more than enough to help if you're having financial difficulties." The suggestion stung, but I kept my voice even. "I'm not asking for help. This is my choice." That's when Thomas had dropped his waste of space comment, followed by Victoria's tittering laugh as they retreated to their climate-controlled luxury. Now, as I finished my prep work, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I'd started as a dishwasher at 15, worked my way through every station in professional kitchens, put myself through culinary school while working double shifts, earned my place at Lawrence through sweat, burns, and countless 18-hour days. I'd missed most of Thomas's childhood chasing Michelin stars. His mother, my late wife Sarah, had raised him largely alone while I built my career. Maybe that's why he turned out more like his wife's family, all money and appearance, no understanding of the joy of creating something with your own hands. The lunch rush started right on time. Office workers in business casual lined up for my fusion tacos, Korean Reubens, and the Irish-Japanese curry that had become my signature dish. Every order was prepared with the same care I'd once given to $200 plates at Lawrence. "Chef Sullivan," called out Margaret, one of my regulars from the law firm down the block. The usual, "Please." I smiled as I assembled her favorite, the curry with house-pickled vegetables. Margaret had been coming since my first week, when she'd taken a chance on the new food truck with the strange menu. "How's business?" she asked while waiting. "Growing every day," I replied, adding an extra pickle because I knew she loved them. "Word of mouth is better than any advertising." She took her food with a smile. "You know, my firm's planning a charity event next month. Would you be interested in catering? The partners loved the lunch spread I brought in from you last week." I paused. Catering a law firm event would be a significant step up from daily lunch service. "I'd be honored," I said, already planning how to adapt my menu for upscale service. The rest of the lunch rush passed in a blur of orders and gratified customers. By 2:30, I'd sold out of nearly everything. As I cleaned my equipment, the same methodical process I'd used in professional kitchens, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Dad, Victoria, and I discussed it. We can help you find something more appropriate for someone of your background. Maybe consulting for restaurants. This food truck situation is affecting our social standing." I set the phone down without responding and continued cleaning. The afternoon sun glinted off my truck's polished surface, reflecting the burgundy letters of my name. My restaurant. My rules. my dream. That evening, I parked the truck in its overnight spot and drove home to my modest apartment. The walls were lined with photographs. Sarah and me in our first apartment, Thomas's graduation, my years at Lawrence. The most recent addition was a picture of my food truck on opening day, me standing proud in my chef's whites beside it. I sat down with a glass of whiskey and my recipe notebook. The law firm catering event would need a special menu, something that showed I could still produce fine dining quality from a mobile kitchen. As I worked, my mind drifted back to my early days in professional kitchens. I'd started at a small Irish pub in my neighborhood, learning the basics of commercial cooking from old Tom Murphy. He taught me more than just recipes. Had shown me that cooking was about heart, about putting a piece of yourself into every dish. When he caught me experimenting with Asian ingredients in traditional Irish dishes, he hadn't scoffed. Instead, he encouraged me to develop my own style. "Never let anyone tell you there's only one way to cook," he'd said. "Food is alive, it evolves, just like we do." That philosophy had carried me through culinary school, through years of working my way up through increasingly prestigious kitchens, finally landing the executive chef position at Lawrence. I earned a Michelin star there, maintained it for 8 years. But somewhere along the way, the joy had started to fade. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Thomas. "The Hendersons asked about you at the club today. Had to make excuses about your situation. Please consider our offer to help." I took another sip of whiskey, remembering the day I decided to leave Lawrence. The owner had been pushing for a more conventional menu, less of my fusion creations. "People expect certain things at this price point," he'd said. "They want traditional French cuisine, not experiments." That same week, I'd eaten lunch from a food truck, simple Vietnamese-Mexican fusion that reminded me why I fell in love with cooking in the first place. The chef owner had such passion, such joy in his work. I'd gone home and started planning that night. The next morning, I arrived at my truck early to prep for a private breakfast service I'd booked with a tech startup. As I worked, a familiar voice called out, "Jimmy Sullivan, is that really you?" I looked up to find Marco Rodriguez, my old sous chef from Lawrence. He'd left to open his own place a few years back. "Marco, how are you, my friend?" He approached the truck, examining it with professional interest. "So the rumors are true. The great James Sullivan is running a food truck." I braced for the judgment, the same disapproval I'd gotten from Thomas. Instead, Marco broke into a huge grin. "About time you did something for yourself, chef. I've heard about your fusion street food. Mind if I try some?" I cooked him my signature curry, watching nervously as he took the first bite. His eyes widened. "Dios mío, Jimmy. This is better than what we were doing at Lawrence. You finally found your voice, haven't you?" Something loosened in my chest. Approval from a peer I respected meant more than I'd realized. Marco wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Listen, I'm organizing a food festival next month. High-end restaurants, food trucks, everything in between. Would you be interested?" "What kind of festival?" "Chicago Fusion Fest. We've got some big names coming, some critics too. Could be good exposure." I thought about it. A festival would mean adapting my setup for high-volume service, but also a chance to showcase my food to a broader audience. "Count me in," I said. As Marco left, my phone buzzed yet again. Victoria this time. "James, we're hosting a dinner party next week for Thomas's potential clients. We'd appreciate if you didn't mention your current occupation if you attend. Perhaps say you're between consulting projects." I started typing a response, then deleted it. Instead, I focused on prep work for the morning rush. The knife moved smoothly through vegetables, the familiar rhythm soothing my thoughts. Each ingredient prepared with the same care I'd used at Lawrence. Each dish assembled with attention to both flavor and presentation. The breakfast service for the tech startup was a success. Young professionals in casual clothes exclaiming over the fusion breakfast burritos and Korean spiced hash browns. Their CEO pulled me aside afterward. "Chef Sullivan, this was incredible. Would you be interested in a regular contract? Breakfast service 3 days a week." Another step forward. Another validation of my choice. The morning stretched into lunch service, my regular customers mixing with new faces drawn by word of mouth. Margaret from the law firm stopped by again. "Chef, the partners loved your proposal for the charity event. They've approved the budget. It's yours if you want it." I did want it. Not for the money, but for the challenge of proving that a food truck chef could deliver fine dining quality. As I worked, I thought about Sarah, what she would make of all this. She'd always supported my dreams, even when they meant long hours away from home. "You were born to cook," she'd tell me. "That's not just a job, it's who you are." The last time I saw her in the hospital, weak from cancer treatments but still smiling, she made me promise not to lose my passion for cooking. "Life's too short to make food you don't believe in," she'd said. I stayed at Lawrence for 5 years after her death, going through the motions, creating technically perfect dishes that meant nothing to me. Until finally, I realized I was breaking my promise to her. The food truck wasn't just a business. It was my declaration of independence, my return to cooking with joy and passion. Thomas saw it as a step down. I saw it as a step forward. As the lunch rush wound down, I checked my sales for the day. Another record. Word was spreading, my customer base growing. The catering opportunities were increasing too. My phone buzzed with another text from Thomas. "Dad, please. This isn't who you are. You're better than this food truck business." But he was wrong. This was exactly who I was, a chef who'd found his way back to cooking with heart. The waste of space was creating something unique, something genuine, something that made people happy. I looked at my gleaming truck in the afternoon sun, the burgundy letters proud against the stainless steel. Sullivan's Street Cuisine. My name, my food, my choice. The Michelin critics would come later, as would the national recognition and the vindication. But right then, standing beside my truck, counting my satisfied customers and planning my festival menu, I already felt like a success. Because sometimes the biggest achievement isn't maintaining status or meeting others' expectations. Sometimes it's having the courage to follow your passion, even when those closest to you don't understand. I started prep for tomorrow's service, my knife moving with practiced precision through fresh ingredients. Each cut, each preparation, a statement. This is who I am. This is what I do, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The morning of the Chicago Fusion Fest arrived with perfect September weather. I parked my truck in the designated spot, surrounded by a mix of high-end restaurant booths and other food trucks. The festival wouldn't start for 2 hours, but I could already feel the energy building. "Looking good, Jimmy," Marco called out, clipboard in hand as he managed the vendor setup. He positioned me in a prime spot, right at the intersection of 2 main walkways. I'd spent weeks perfecting my festival menu, signature dishes, plus some new creations. My Korean-Irish fusion had evolved, each recipe refined through customer feedback and continuous experimentation. The prep work had started 3 days ago, every component made from scratch. As I set up my station, I noticed several professional cameras circulating, food bloggers, local news, and, if Marco was to be believed, representatives from some national publications. I kept my head down, focusing on my mise en place. The food would speak for itself. "Dad?" I looked up to find Thomas standing there, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes that probably cost more than my monthly food costs. No Victoria in sight. "Son, this is the surprise." He shifted his weight, glancing around at the growing crowd. "I saw the festival mentioned in the Tribune. Your truck was listed as one of the must-try vendors." That was news to me. I'd been too busy preparing to read reviews. "Look, Dad," he continued, "I know I've been harsh about your choices. But maybe I was hasty in my judgment. Before I could respond, a voice called out from the crowd. "Is this Sullivan's?" "Oh, thank God. You're here." A well-dressed woman hurried over. "Chef Sullivan, I'm Jennifer Hayes from Hayes Consulting. You catered our lunch meeting last month. Listen, we have a client appreciation event coming up. Very high-end. Would you be interested in discussing the catering?" I could see Thomas's expression changing as Jennifer gushed about my food, especially when she mentioned that several of her clients had specifically requested my catering for their own events. "Of course," I said, handing her my business card, professional quality, with my truck's logo embossed in burgundy. "Call me next week, and we'll discuss details." She left just as the festival was opening to the public. Thomas lingered, watching as I finished my preparation. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" he asked. "Always have been, son. Cooking isn't just what I do. It's who I am. The venue doesn't matter. What matters is the food and the passion behind it." The crowd started flowing in, and soon I was too busy to continue the conversation. Thomas melted away as I focused on service, each dish prepared with the same care, whether it was for a food blogger or a regular customer. By noon, the lines at my truck were consistently long. I caught glimpses of people taking photos of my food, heard excited conversations about the fusion flavors. Marco stopped by briefly, grinning. "Jimmy, you're trending on social media. The food critics are talking. Keep doing what you're doing." I kept my head down and focused on the food. Each plate had to be perfect, each fusion element balanced. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about staying true to my culinary vision. Mid-afternoon, I noticed a commotion near my truck. Victoria was there, with what appeared to be her entire social circle, all of them dressed inappropriately fancy for a food festival. "James," she called out, her voice carrying that familiar condescending tone. "We were at the club and heard everyone talking about your truck. Apparently, you're quite the sensation today." I continued working, plating an order of my Irish-Korean bulgogi tacos. "Welcome to Sullivan's. What can I get you?" She seemed thrown off by my professional demeanor. Her friends were examining my menu with surprising interest. "Is it true you were written up in the Tribune?" one of them asked. "My husband said your fusion concept is revolutionary." Before Victoria could respond, a man in a well-cut suit approached the truck. "Chef Sullivan. I'm Michael Bennett from the Michelin Guide. Mind if we have a word?" I could see Victoria's expression freeze. Her friends suddenly looked at my truck with new eyes. "Of course," I said, gesturing to my second station where my newly hired assistant was handling orders. "Give me a moment to finish this service." I could hear Victoria's group whispering as they walked away. Words like visionary and ahead of his time drifted back. How quickly judgment could shift when validation came from the right sources. The conversation with the Michelin representative was brief but significant. They were considering a new category for their guide, recognizing excellence in mobile cuisine. My truck was under consideration for inclusion. As the festival wound down, Thomas returned, this time with a different attitude. "Dad, I've been thinking. Victoria and I are hosting a dinner party next week for some important clients. Would you consider catering it?" I looked at my son, seeing perhaps for the first time how much pressure he put on himself to maintain appearances. "The truck's booked that night," I said. "Law firm charity event. But I appreciate the offer." He nodded, understanding the gentle rejection. "I get it. You've built something here. Something real." As I cleaned up my station that evening, I thought about how success is measured. Not in dollars or status, but in staying true to your passion, in creating something authentic that brings joy to others. The festival had been a turning point, but not because of the recognition or potential Michelin inclusion. It was validation of what I'd known all along, that true cooking transcends venue, that passion and skill matter more than pretense. I looked at my truck, now famous on social media, possibly soon to be featured in the Michelin Guide. Sullivan's street cuisine gleamed in the setting sun, a testament to choosing your own path, regardless of others' expectations. Sometimes the greatest success comes not from meeting others' standards, but from having the courage to set your own. 3 months after the Chicago Fusion Fest, everything had changed. The Michelin Guide had indeed created their new mobile cuisine category, and Sullivan's Street Cuisine was among the first recipients of their Street Star recognition. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years chasing Michelin stars in traditional restaurants, only to earn recognition when I finally chose to cook my way. My phone rang as I was prepping for the morning service. It was Thomas. "Dad, have you seen the Wall Street Journal?" "Been a bit busy, son." I was dicing vegetables for my signature kimchi-spiked Irish colcannon. "There's a feature article about the evolution of fine dining. You're mentioned as a pioneer, a former Michelin-starred chef who's revolutionizing the intersection of street food and haute cuisine." I almost cut myself, surprised by the news. That's unexpected. They're calling it the Sullivan Effect. High-end chefs embracing mobile venues and fusion concepts. Victoria's father actually asked for your number. He wants to discuss investment opportunities. I smiled, remembering Victoria's dismissive giggle from that first day. Tell him I appreciate the interest, but I'm not looking for investors. The truth was, offers had been pouring in. Restaurant groups wanting to franchise my concept, investors promising to turn Sullivan's into a national brand, even television producers pitching show ideas. I turned them all down. Success had brought other changes too. I'd hired 3 full-time staff members, all young culinary school graduates who shared my passion for fusion cuisine. We now operated 2 trucks, with a third on the way, each serving a different area of Chicago. But I kept the operations intentionally small, maintaining the quality and personal touch that had built our reputation. The morning rush started, and I fell into the familiar rhythm of service. My newest creation, an Irish-Japanese fusion stew that combined the heartiness of traditional Irish cooking with the umami depth of Japanese dashi, had developed a following. Food bloggers regularly posted about trying to guess the secret ingredients. Chef Sullivan, a familiar voice, called out. It was Margaret from the law firm, but she wasn't alone. She was with an elderly gentleman I recognized immediately. James Beard award-winning chef Anthony Torres, known for his innovative approach to traditional cuisine. "Chef Torres," I nodded respectfully. "Welcome to Sullivan's." "James," he smiled, "I had to see this for myself. Margaret here has been telling me about your fusion concepts. Mind if I try the special?" I prepared his order personally, aware of the significance of the moment, but keeping my hands steady. Years of professional kitchen experience had taught me to stay calm under pressure. As he took his first bite, his eyes widened slightly. "Remarkable balance," he said. "You've managed to honor both culinary traditions while creating something entirely new. Would you consider being a guest lecturer at my cooking school?" Before I could respond, another familiar face appeared. Victoria, alone this time, looking slightly uncertain. "James," she said, "I was hoping to catch you." She glanced at Chef Torres, recognition flickering across her face, but continued. I owe you an apology. What I said when you started this, I was wrong." I handed her a bowl of the fusion stew. "Try this," I said simply. She took a careful bite, and I saw genuine surprise in her expression. "This is incredible," she admitted. "I understand now why Thomas always talked about your cooking when we first met, back when you were at Lawrence." Chef Torres was watching this interaction with interest. "Lawrence? You were the executive chef who left at the height of his success." I nodded. Sometimes you have to step away from what others consider success to find your own path. He nodded thoughtfully. "Would you consider collaborating on a book? Not just recipes, but the philosophy behind your journey from fine dining to street cuisine." The old me would have jumped at such an offer. Now, I took my time considering it. As long as I can keep cooking, I said finally, the truck comes first. Victoria was still there, watching this exchange. The country club is hosting a food and wine festival next month, she said. Would you consider participating? As a featured chef, not just a vendor. I could hear the effort it took her to make this offer, to acknowledge my status as a peer rather than an embarrassment. Send me the details, I said, if I can fit it into our schedule. The lunch rush picked up, and both Victoria and Chef Torres left with promises to return. As I worked, I thought about how success had changed things, not just professionally, but personally. Thomas had become a regular visitor to the truck, often bringing clients for lunch meetings. He'd stopped being embarrassed about my choice and started proudly introducing me as my dad, the chef who started the mobile fusion cuisine movement. But the real satisfaction came from the everyday moments, watching customers try fusion combinations they'd never considered before, teaching my young staff the importance of respecting both tradition and innovation, seeing the smile on someone's face as they tasted something new and wonderful. One evening, as I was cleaning up after service, Marco stopped by. "Jimmy," he said, "remember when I first saw your truck? I knew then you'd found your calling. But this," he gestured to the line of people still waiting despite our sold-out sign, "this is beyond what anyone expected." I wiped down my workspace, maintaining the same standards of cleanliness I'd learned in my first kitchen job. "Success isn't about meeting expectations," I said. "It's about staying true to your vision." "The food festival wants you as next year's headliner," he said. "They're creating a special category for mobile cuisine. The Sullivan category, they're calling it." I had to laugh at that. A year ago, my son had called me a waste of space for starting a food truck. Now my name was becoming synonymous with a new movement in cuisine. But as I looked at my truck in the evening light, the burgundy letters still proud against the stainless steel, I knew that none of that really mattered. What mattered was the food, the creativity, the joy of cooking what I believed in. Success hadn't changed that fundamental truth. If anything, it had reinforced it. Every day, I still got up excited to create new combinations, to push the boundaries of fusion cuisine, to share my passion with others. The next morning, as I prepped for another day of service, I found a note tucked under the truck's wiper blade. It was from Thomas. "Dad, I was wrong about everything. You didn't step down, you stepped forward. Thank you for showing me that success isn't about meeting others' expectations, but about having the courage to follow your own path. Love, your son." I smiled and pocketed the note. Then I turned to my prep work, ready to start another day of doing what I loved, my way. 1 year to the day after Thomas and Victoria's first mocking visit to my food truck, I stood in my newly opened Culinary Innovation Center. Not a restaurant, not a chain of food trucks, but something entirely different. A place where aspiring chefs could learn about fusion cuisine and mobile food service excellence. The idea had come from the countless young culinary students who'd sought me out, asking how to combine traditional techniques with street food creativity. Rather than franchise Sullivans, I decided to teach others how to find their own culinary voice. The center occupied a renovated warehouse in Chicago's bustling food district. One section housed a state-of-the-art teaching kitchen. Another served as a food truck incubator where new chefs could test their concepts. The original Sullivan's truck, my first, stood in a place of honor, still used for special events and training. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the first class of culinary students, "welcome to Sullivan's Innovation Center. Here, we don't just teach cooking, we teach courage. The courage to break conventions, to respect traditions while creating something new, to believe in your culinary vision." Among the attendees, I spotted Thomas and Victoria sitting quietly in the back. They'd become unexpected supporters of my vision, with Thomas helping to structure the business side of the center and Victoria using her social connections to create opportunities for graduating students. A year ago, I continued, I was called a waste of space for starting a food truck. Today, that same food truck has changed how people think about mobile cuisine. But success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. After the orientation, as students explored the facility, Thomas approached me. Dad, remember when I said this wasn't who you were? He gestured around the center. I was right, but not in the way I thought. This, teaching others to follow their passion, showing them how to combine tradition with innovation. This is exactly who you are. Victoria, standing beside him, nodded. James, the country club is creating a permanent space for gourmet food trucks. They're calling it Sullivan Square. Would you help curate the vendors? I smiled at the irony. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Later that evening, alone in the center, I walked through the teaching kitchen. The gleaming equipment, the pristine workstations, the wall of international spices and ingredients. Everything was ready to help new chefs discover their own fusion style. On my office wall hung 3 items: the original Sullivan Street Cuisine logo sketch, the Michelin Street Star certificate, and a framed copy of that first negative review that had called my food truck concept a desperate attempt at relevance by a has-been chef. Below them sat a small photo of Sarah, smiling in our first apartment's tiny kitchen. Life's too short to make food you don't believe in, she'd said. Those words had guided me from a prestigious restaurant kitchen to a food truck, and now to this center where I could help others find their culinary truth. The next morning, as I prepared to teach my first master class, I received a text from Thomas. Dad, Victoria's pregnant. We're hoping our child inherits your passion and courage. I pocketed the phone, smiling, and faced my students. Today, we're going to talk about fusion cuisine. Not just combining flavors, but combining dreams. Sometimes the most powerful combinations come from having the courage to put together things that others say don't belong. Looking at their eager faces, I saw the future of cuisine. Chefs unafraid to break conventions, to cook with passion, to serve their food their way. The Sullivan effect wasn't just about food trucks or fusion cuisine. It was about having the courage to follow your culinary heart. As I demonstrated my signature Irish-Korean bulgogi tacos, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From a prestigious restaurant kitchen to a waste of space in a food truck to becoming a symbol of culinary innovation. But more importantly, to becoming someone true to himself. Success, I realized, isn't measured in stars or reviews or even in changing the industry. It's measured in the joy you bring to others while staying true to yourself. My food truck hadn't just changed my life. It had shown others that passion and excellence can thrive anywhere, even on 4 wheels. Remember, I told my students as we finished the class, every great cuisine started as fusion. Every great chef started as someone who dared to try something different. Your venue doesn't define your food, your passion does. And with that, Sullivan's Innovation Center was officially launched, ready to inspire the next generation of chefs to follow their own path, wherever it might lead.